I am Colton, 36 years old, and I stood in a room full of people who shared my DNA but knew absolutely nothing about who I really was. I watched my brother humiliate my son for the 10th time that night, while my parents nodded in agreement. Before I tell you about the moment I destroyed their entire reality with a single blue folder and a set of car keys, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. It was a Sunday. In my family, Sunday dinners were mandatory. It was a tradition my mother, Martha, enforced with an iron fist. If you missed a Sunday, you didn't care about this family. That was the rule. I pulled my 2014 Honda Civic into the driveway of my parents' house. The brakes squeaked a little. I needed to get that fixed, but honestly, I kept the car this way on purpose. It was part of the uniform of the struggling single dad. My 10-year-old son, Leo, sat in the passenger seat. He was clutching his violin case like it was a life preserver. He looked pale. "Do we have to go in, Dad?" he asked. His voice was small. It broke my heart every time he used that tone. I turned off the engine and looked at him. "We do, buddy. Just for a couple of hours. Stick with me. Ignoring them is a superpower. Remember?" "I know," Leo said, looking out the window. "But Uncle Julian is already here." I followed his gaze. Parked right in the center of the driveway, blocking the path to the garage, was a gleaming black Mercedes S-Class. It was fresh from the car wash. It screamed money. It screamed status. It was everything my brother Julian wanted the world to think he was. "Let's go," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. We walked up to the front door. I could already hear the laughter inside. It was loud, boisterous, and completely lacking in warmth. My stomach tightened. I wasn't nervous for myself, I was past that. I was nervous for Leo. We walked in. The smell of roast beef and expensive cologne hit me immediately. Julian was holding court in the living room, a glass of scotch in one hand. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. My mother was sitting on the couch, looking at him with adoration. My father, Robert, was standing by the fireplace, nodding at whatever brilliance Julian was spewing. "And look who finally decided to show up," Julian announced, his voice booming. He didn't stand up to greet us. The freelancer and his protege. "Hello, Julian," I said, keeping my voice even. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad." "You're late," my father grunted. He didn't look at me. He was looking at my worn-out jeans. "And you didn't shave." "I've been working, Dad," I said. "Working?" Julian scoffed. He took a sip of his scotch. "Clicking buttons on a laptop in your pajamas isn't work, Colton. It's a hobby. Real men go to an office. Real men build empires." I didn't take the bait. I put a hand on Leo's shoulder. "Go say hi to Grandma." Leo walked over to my mother. "Hi, Grandma," he said politely. My mother looked him up and down. She frowned. "Leo, why is your hair so long? You look like a girl. Doesn't your father ever take you to a barber?" "I like it this way," Leo mumbled. "Speak up, boy," my father barked from the fireplace. "Mumbling is for cowards. Stand up straight." Leo stiffened. I felt the heat rising in my chest. This was within the first 2 minutes. "He's fine, Dad," I cut in. "He's 10. Leave him alone." "He's soft," Julian said, walking over and patting Leo on the head a little too hard. "That's what happens when you don't have a mother figure in the house. No offense, Colton, but you're not exactly teaching him how to be an alpha, are you? Look at him. He's carrying a violin. Why isn't he playing football like my Kevin?" Kevin, Julian's 11-year-old son, was sitting in the corner playing on an iPad. He looked up and smirked. He was a mini Julian in training. "Violin takes discipline," I said quietly. "Leo is talented." "Talent doesn't pay the mortgage," Julian laughed. "Speaking of mortgages, how's that little apartment of yours? Still renting? Interest rates are climbing. If you don't buy soon, you'll be renting forever. It's practically throwing money in the trash." "We're happy where we are," I lied. Or rather, I told the version of the truth they could handle. Dinner was served 20 minutes later. We sat around the large mahogany dining table. My mother sat at one end, my father at the other. Julian sat on my father's right, the seat of honor. His wife, Elena, sat next to him. She looked tired. She was a nice woman, but she had lost her spark years ago. I caught her eye and gave a small nod. She gave me a weak, apologetic smile. I sat on the left with Leo beside me. The conversation, as always, revolved around Julian. So, the deal closed on Friday. Julian was saying, cutting into his roast beef with aggressive precision. $2 million on the table. I walked in, told them take it or leave it, and walked out. They called me back in 5 minutes. That's how you handle business. That's my boy. My father beamed. You have the killer instinct, Julian. Just like I did. I'm looking at upgrading the Mercedes, Julian continued, glancing at me to make sure I was listening. Maybe a Porsche next. Or a Range Rover. Something with more presence. I chewed my food slowly. A Porsche. That was funny. Colton drives a Honda, Kevin piped up. It smells like old French fries. The table erupted in laughter. Even my mother chuckled. Leo stopped eating. He put his fork down. It's a reliable car, Kevin, I said. It's an embarrassment, my father corrected. Colton, I told you I could get you a job at the plant. Supervisor role. You'd have benefits. A steady paycheck. You could get a real car. Why are you so stubborn? I have a job, Dad. I do market analysis. I have clients. Freelancing. My mother sighed. It's so unstable. What if you get sick? Who will take care of Leo? You have to think about the future. You can't just float through life. I'm not floating, I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. Then Julian turned his attention to Leo. He seemed bored with bragging about himself and needed a new target. So Leo, Julian said, pointing his fork at my son, Kevin made the varsity soccer team. Starting forward. What are you doing? Still playing that squeaky fiddle? It's a violin, Leo said, looking at his plate. And I made first chair in the district orchestra. Orchestra? Julian rolled his eyes. He looked at my father. See? This is what I'm talking about. The boy needs toughening up. He's surrounded by softness. I'm just saying, Julian continued, leaning forward, a smirk playing on his lips. Single parenthood has its challenges. We get it. But Marcus, sorry Leo, seems a bit behind. Emotionally, physically. Maybe if your son had 2 parents, specifically a mother, he wouldn't be such a mess. The room went silent. The word mess hung in the air. Leo pushed his plate away. His lip trembled. He fought it, but a single tear rolled down his cheek. Oh look, Kevin laughed. He's crying. Stop it. Elena whispered to Julian, touching his arm. That's enough. I'm just trying to help. Julian threw his hands up. Someone has to tell the truth. Colton is ruining the kid. Look at him. A boy needs a mother to be a man. Look at him crying over a little criticism. My father nodded. Julian is right, Colton. You're too soft on him. Maybe you should let him stay with us for the summer. We'll straighten him out. Get him away from that apartment and that lifestyle. I placed my napkin on the table. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. I had taken the insults about my car. I had taken the insults about my job. I had taken the insults about my clothes. But they had made my son cry. You think he's a mess because he plays the violin? I asked. My voice was low, but it cut through the room. I think he's a mess because his father is a loser who can't provide a stable environment, Julian spat out. And I think you're jealous because I'm the one carrying this family's name to new heights. Speaking of which, Mom, Dad, I have news. Julian puffed out his chest. He looked around the table, ensuring all eyes were on him. I just put a down payment on the estate up on Hidden Hills, the big white one overlooking the valley. We move in 45 days. My mother gasped. Oh, Julian, that house is a mansion. I'm so proud of you. Finally, my father said, glaring at me. One of my sons has made it. I looked at Julian. I looked at the smug satisfaction on his face. Then I looked at Leo wiping his eyes. I knew that house in Hidden Hills. I knew it very well, because I knew the bank that held the deed. And I knew the financial status of the man claiming to buy it. I reached down into my battered leather satchel sitting by my feet. My fingers brushed against the cold plastic of a blue folder. Hidden Hills? I asked. That's a big commitment, Julian. It's what success looks like, Colton. You wouldn't understand, he sneered. No, I said, pulling the folder out and placing it on the table. I don't think I do, but maybe this will explain it. I opened the folder. The top document was stamped in red. Notice of default. I looked at Julian. Dad said let it go, but I've held it too long. The room was about to get very quiet. To understand why that folder on the dinner table was a nuclear bomb, you have to understand the last 5 years of my life. You have to understand the scar that wouldn't fade. 5 years ago, my wife, Sarah, died in a car accident. It was a drunk driver. A Tuesday afternoon. Just like that, my world ended. Leo was 5. I was 31. I was working as a mid-level analyst at a logistics firm back then. When Sarah died, I fell apart. I couldn't focus, couldn't sleep. I showed up to work in a daze. Eventually, they let me go. Compassionate leave turned into severance package. My family's reaction wasn't support. It was judgment. You need to pull yourself together. My father had told me at the funeral, standing over Sarah's open grave. Men don't wallow. You have a son to feed. He's grieving, Bob, my mother had said, but her tone was dismissive. But he does need to think about money. Sarah didn't have much life insurance, did she? She didn't. We were young. We thought we had time. The insurance payout was modest. $150,000. To my parents, that was a lot of money. To a young widower with a 5-year-old and no job, it was a ticking clock. That was the moment the narrative was written. Colton is the broken one. Colton is the charity case. Julian, meanwhile, was rising in the sales world, flashing watches and leasing cars, becoming the golden child my father always wanted. But here is the secret I kept locked in my chest, right next to the pain of losing Sarah. I didn't just sit on that couch for 5 years. I took that $150,000 insurance money. It was everything Sarah had left us. I was terrified of losing it, but I was more terrified of being poor and helpless. I had a background in data analysis. I understood patterns. While my family thought I was depressed and sleeping all day, I was studying the markets. I didn't sleep. I traded. I analyzed emerging tech sectors. I read financial reports until my eyes bled. I treated the stock market like a battlefield where I was fighting for Leo's life. And I was good at it. Scary good. The first year, I turned that $150,000 into $400,000. By year 3, I hit my first $1 million. By year 4, I started buying distressed assets, businesses that were failing but had good bones. I turned them around or sold them for parts. I incorporated a private holding company. I named it S&L Holdings. Sarah and Leo. I was the majority shareholder. I was the silent partner in 3 manufacturing firms and a tech startup in Austin. But I never told my parents. Why? Because the one time I mentioned I made a good trade, Julian asked for a loan to fix his boat. When I hesitated, my mother said, "Family helps family, Colton. Don't be greedy." I realized then that if they knew I had money, I would never know if they loved me or my wallet. And worse, they would try to control how I spent it. They would try to control Leo. So I bought a costume, the Honda Civic, the small 2-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood, which I owned outright, along with the entire building, but they didn't need to know that. I lived a double life. During the day, I dropped Leo off at school in the Honda. Then I drove to a private parking garage downtown where S&L Holdings had its office. I parked the Honda. I walked to spot 4B. That's where the beast lived. A Porsche Panamera Turbo S, jet black. It wasn't just a car. It was a sanctuary. It was the only place where I allowed myself to feel successful. I would sit in that leather seat, smell the new car scent, and just breathe. It was my reminder that I wasn't a failure. I wasn't a mess. But I never drove it to my parents' house. I never drove it to school events. Which brings us back to the dinner. The week before the notice of default incident, I had received a call from Mr. Sterling. Sterling was the CEO of a mid-sized regional bank that S&L Holdings had recently acquired a controlling interest in. Technically, I was Mr. Sterling's boss, though I let him run the show. Mr. Colton. Sterling's voice was tense on the phone. We have a situation with a loan in the queue. It's flagged as a conflict of interest for you. What is it? I asked, looking at a spreadsheet on my monitor. It's a foreclosure proceeding. The borrower is Julian Miller. I stopped typing. My brother. Yes, sir. He has a commercial loan for a business venture that went belly up 6 months ago. He guaranteed it with his personal assets, including his house. He's missed 3 mortgage payments. The system is set to seize the property. I spun my chair around, looking out the window at the city skyline. He told everyone he just closed a $2 million deal. The credit report says otherwise, sir. He's maxed out on everything. He's drowning. And there's something else. Tell me. He submitted a new application yesterday for a jumbo mortgage on a property in Hidden Hills. He falsified his income statements. He's trying to use a non-existent bonus to qualify. My brother wasn't just broke. He was committing fraud. What do you want to do, sir? We can reject it quietly. I thought about the insults. I thought about how he called Leo a sissy because he liked art. I thought about my father telling me I should be more like Julian. Approve the purchase of his bad debt, I said coldly. Move his mortgage from the general pool to my personal holding portfolio. Sir, you heard me. I want to own his debt. I want to be the one holding the paper. Understood. And the Hidden Hills application. Let it pend. I'll handle that personally. I hung up the phone. I felt a mix of guilt and power. I wasn't planning to ruin him. I just wanted leverage. I wanted him to stop bullying my son. I wanted to sit him down privately and say, I own your house. Stop being a jerk, and we can work this out. I was going to be the bigger man. I was going to be the savior. But then came Sunday night. Then came the mess comment. Then came the tears on Leo's face. As I sat there at the dinner table, watching Julian brag about a house he couldn't afford, fueled by lies and my parents' toxic enabling, something in me snapped. The bigger man left the building. The bigger man doesn't protect his son from predators. A father does. I looked at the folder. I looked at my father. Dad, I said, my voice trembling slightly with adrenaline. You always said facts are stubborn things, right? What are you babbling about? My father snapped. The facts, I said. About the golden child. I pushed the folder toward Julian. It slid across the polished mahogany table and hit his wine glass with a sharp clink. Let's rewind just a few days before that dinner to show you how the storm clouds gathered. Because the dinner wasn't an isolated incident. It was the finale of a week of hell. It started on a Wednesday. My phone rang. It was Julian. He never called unless he wanted something. Hey, little brother, he said. His voice had that fake salesman charm. How's the... whatever it is you do? Typing? It's going fine, Julian. What do you need? I've got an opportunity. A once-in-a-lifetime thing. Tech startup. Needs bridge capital. I know you're sitting on that insurance money from Sarah still. Probably getting 0.0% interest in a savings account. My grip on the phone tightened. He thought I was still living off Sarah's death benefit. I'm not interested, Julian. Don't be stupid, Colton. I'm trying to help you. You put in 50 grand, I can triple it in a month. You can finally buy a decent car. Get Leo some, I don't know, manly lessons. Boxing or something. No. His tone changed instantly. The charm evaporated. You selfish prick. You're just sitting on cash while family is out here hustling? You know, mom and dad are worried about Leo. They think you're depressed. Unfit. Unfit. The word came out as a growl. Yeah. Custody is a tricky thing, Colton. Grandparents have rights in this state. If they can prove the father is financially unstable and emotionally checked out. Well, he hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, the phone shaking in my hand. He had threatened to take my son. He had threatened to use my poverty against me to steal the only thing I lived for. That afternoon, I went to the grocery store to clear my head. I was pushing my cart down the cereal aisle when I saw a woman standing in front of the generic brands, weeping. It was Elena, Julian's wife. She wasn't wearing her usual designer sunglasses. She looked exhausted. Her cart had cheap pasta, generic sauce, and bulk rice. No wine. No expensive steaks. I approached her slowly. Elena! She jumped, quickly wiping her eyes. Colton! I didn't see you. Are you okay? She tried to smile, but her lip quivered. She looked around to see if anyone was watching. Then she broke. It's all a lie, Colton, she whispered, her voice cracking. Everything. What is? Julian. He lost his job 8 months ago. They fired him for padding his expense accounts. We've been living on credit cards. He makes me dress up and go to these dinners, but our cards are getting declined at the gas station. I felt a surge of pity, but also anger. Why doesn't he tell Mom and Dad? They'd help him. He can't, she sobbed. His ego won't let him. He'd rather starve than admit he's not the favorite son who succeeds at everything. And now, he's talking about this new house. I don't know what to do. I'm scared, Colton. He's taking out payday loans. She grabbed my arm. Please don't tell him I told you. He'll kill me. Not literally, but he'll make my life hell. I won't tell him, I promised. I pulled a wad of cash from my pocket, about $400 I kept for emergencies, and pressed it into her hand. Buy the groceries, Elena. Buy the kids whatever they need. She looked at the money like it was a gold bar. I can't. Take it. She took it and hugged me. It was a desperate hug. That interaction changed everything. Julian wasn't just a bully. He was a drowning man trying to stand on everyone else's heads to keep breathing, and he was willing to use my son as a stepping stone. The next day, Thursday, was the final straw. Leo came home from school with a permission slip for the Young Virtuosos summer program. It was a prestigious music camp. He had been invited. Dad, can I go? Please? Mr. Henderson said I have a real shot at the scholarship. Of course, Leo. We'll make it happen. That evening, I got an email from the private school my parents had been trying to get Kevin into for years. St. Jude's Academy. It was the Harvard of elementary schools in our city. The email was addressed to me. Dear Mr. Colton Miller, we are pleased to inform you that based on his exceptional aptitude test scores and his musical portfolio, Leo has been offered a full scholarship to St. Jude's for the upcoming fall semester. I was stunned. I hadn't even applied. Then I saw the CC line. It was copied to the guidance counselor at Leo's public school. Leo had applied himself. My 10-year-old son had filled out the forms, got his teacher to recommend him, and submitted it. I was bursting with pride. But 20 minutes later, my mother called. Colton, did you pull strings? She demanded. What? St. Jude's. Julian just called. He found out Leo got in. Kevin didn't get in. They rejected Kevin. That's unfortunate. But Leo earned it, Mom. You have to decline it, she said. I froze. Excuse me? You have to decline the spot. It will break Julian's heart. Kevin is the smart one, Colton. Leo is, well, he's artsy. He won't fit in at St. Jude's. It looks bad if your son gets in and Julian's doesn't. Just tell them you can't afford the uniforms or something. Julian is really upset. I hung up the phone. I didn't say goodbye. I just pressed the red button. They wanted me to sabotage my son's future to protect Julian's ego. That was the moment the storm broke. I walked into my home office. I opened my safe. I took out the deed to my apartment building. I took out the statements for S&L Holdings. And I called Mr. Sterling again. Execute the purchase of the debt, I told him. And get me the full file on Julian's finances. Everything. Every bounce check. Every lie. Sir, are you sure? I'm done being the punching bag, Sterling. It's time to hit back. So, when I walked into that dinner on Sunday, I wasn't just armed with a folder. I was armed with the righteous fury of a father who had been pushed too far. Julian thought he was fighting a sheep. He didn't know he was stepping into the cage with a lion. Friday morning, 2 days before the dinner. I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. Usually, I put on a faded t-shirt and jeans. Today, I reached into the back of the closet. I pulled out a bespoke charcoal gray suit I hadn't worn in 6 months. I tied a silk tie. I put on my vintage Omega watch, the one Sarah gave me, the one I usually kept hidden in a sock drawer. I looked at myself. This was the real Colton. The one who commanded boardrooms. Dad. Leo appeared at the door, rubbing his eyes. Where are you going? You look like a movie star. I smiled and knelt down. I have a very important meeting, Leo. A meeting about our future. Are you getting married? He asked, panicked. I laughed. No, buddy. Nothing like that. I'm just gonna fix some things. Hey, I want you to know something. You getting into St. Jude's? That's the proudest I've ever been. Nobody takes that away from you. Nobody. He hugged me. Thanks, Dad. I dropped Leo off at school. The other parents looked at me in my suit, stepping out of the Honda. They looked confused. I didn't care. I drove to the S&L Holdings garage. I walked past the Honda and approached the beast. The Porsche Panamera. I unlocked it. The lights flickered a greeting. I slid into the driver's seat. The smell of premium leather surrounded me. I pushed the start button. The engine roared to life. A deep, guttural growl that vibrated in my chest. I drove to the bank. When I walked into the main branch of Sterling Regional Bank, the security guard nodded. He knew me, not as the guy in the Honda, but as the guy who owned the place. I took the elevator to the top floor. Mr. Sterling was waiting. Good morning, Mr. Miller, he said, ushering me into his office. He looked nervous. He had the file on his desk. Show me, I said. He opened the file. It was a disaster. Julian had 5 credit cards maxed out. He had a car lease that was 2 months behind. And the business loan, $350,000, was in default. He's been dodging the collection calls for weeks, Sterling said. Legally, we can foreclose on his current home on Tuesday. And the Hidden Hills application? Here. Sterling slid a paper across. He claims he makes $400,000 a year. He attached a forged W-2 form. I stared at the forged document. It was a felony. My brother was a criminal. If I turn this in, I said softly, he goes to jail. Sterling nodded. Yes, sir. Bank fraud is federal. I sat back. I looked at the ceiling. I hated Julian. I hated what he did to me. But jail? That would destroy his kids. Kevin and Chloe didn't deserve to have a father in prison. We don't report the fraud yet, I said. But we use it. How? I want you to prepare a settlement agreement. I will pay off his commercial loan. Personally, S&L Holdings will cover it. Sterling's eyes widened. You're going to pay his debt? Sir, that's $350,000. Why? Because then I own the debt. I become the creditor. And I want a clause added. If he misses one more payment to me, or if he attempts to take out any more credit without my authorization, I take immediate possession of his assets, including his current house. You want to put him on a leash, Sterling realized. A very short leash. And I want full documentation of the foreclosure status as of today. Put it in a blue folder. Blue. Yes, sir. I spent the rest of the day moving money. I transferred funds from my investment accounts. I liquidated a small position in a tech stock. By 3 p.m., I held the paper on my brother's life. I drove the Porsche back to the garage. I switched back to the Honda. I went back to being poor Colton. But the energy was different. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the nuclear codes. Saturday passed in a blur of anxiety. I knew Sunday dinner was coming. I knew they would attack me. I knew they would attack Leo. I almost called and canceled. I almost just ghosted them. But then I remembered the phone call from my mother telling me to decline Leo's scholarship. They needed to be stopped. Not just for me, but for Leo. If I didn't draw a line in the sand now, they would bully my son for the rest of his life. They would make him feel small until he believed it. So Sunday came. We drove to the house. We endured the insults. And now we are back in the dining room. The blue folder is on the table. Julian is staring at it. The silence in the room was heavy. My father looked confused. My mother looked annoyed. "What is this dramatic nonsense?" my mother asked. "A folder? Really, Colton?" "Open it, Julian," I said. Julian laughed nervously. "Is this your resume? Are you asking me for a job? Because I told you, we're not hiring entry-level." "Open it." My voice wasn't loud, but it had the authority of a CEO. It was a tone they had never heard from me. Julian reached out. His hand hesitated. He sensed something was wrong. He flipped open the cover. He read the first line. His smirk vanished. He read the second line. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like gray putty. This isn't possible," he whispered. "What?" my father demanded. "What is it?" "It's a notice of default," Julian stammered. "From the bank." "That must be a mistake," my mother said dismissively. "Julian just closed a huge deal." "Read the creditor's name, Julian," I said. "Look at who owns the note now." Julian looked at the bottom of the page. He squinted. "Creditor, S&L Holdings, LLC," he read. Then he looked up at me. His eyes were wide with terror. "S&L, Sarah and Leo." "Bingo," I said. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "I bought your debt, Julian. The bank was going to seize your house on Tuesday. They were going to throw you, Elena, and the kids on the street. I stepped in. I paid it off. Now you owe me." "You?" My father stood up. "You don't have $300. How could you buy a debt?" "Sit down, Dad," I said. "Don't tell me to. Sit down." I roared. The sound echoed off the walls. Leo jumped. My father sat down, stunned. "I have stayed silent for 5 years," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "I let you call me a failure. I let you mock my car. I let you mock my parenting. But today you made my son cry. And that ends now." I looked at Julian. "You're not moving to Hidden Hills, Julian. You're broke. You're unemployed. And you're a fraud." The word fraud hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. "Liar!" my mother shrieked. She stood up, knocking her chair back. "How dare you speak to your brother that way? He is a successful businessman. He is everything you are not." "Ask him, Mom," I said calmly, keeping my eyes on Julian. "Ask him why he's been paying the mortgage with payday loans. Ask him why he forged a W-2 to try and scam a bank for a mansion he can't afford." All eyes turned to Julian. He was sweating profusely. He looked like a trapped animal. "It's a temporary cash flow issue," Julian stammered. "The market is tight. The commission checks are delayed. Colton doesn't understand high finance. I understand that you haven't had a job in 8 months." I cut him off. "That's a lie," Julian shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I go to the office every day. You go to Starbucks." Elena's voice was quiet, but it shattered him. Julian whipped his head around. "What did you say?" Elena stood up. She was trembling, but she looked him in the eye. "I know, Julian. I've known for months. I know we're broke. I know about the credit cards." "You shut up," Julian screamed at her. "You ungrateful. Don't you talk to her like that," I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a key fob. It wasn't the Honda key. It was the heavy, sleek fob of the Porsche Panamera. I tossed it onto the table next to the blue folder. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is that?" my father asked, eyeing the crest on the key. "That," I said, "is for the car parked 3 blocks away because I didn't want to embarrass you. It's mine. Paid for in cash." "A Porsche," Julian whispered. "You drive a Honda." I drive a Honda because I don't need a car to tell me I'm a man, I said. I own SNL Holdings, Julian. I'm not a freelancer. I'm an asset manager. My net worth is, well, let's just say I could buy that house in Hidden Hills cash if I wanted to. But I don't. Because I don't need to prove anything to people who don't love me. My parents were staring at me as if I had grown a second head. The dynamic in the room shifted so violently I could almost feel the air pressure change. Suddenly, I wasn't the failure. I was the power. You have money? My mother whispered. Her eyes didn't fill with pride. They filled with calculation. Colton, why didn't you say something? We're family. We could have invested together. Invested? I laughed bitterly. You mean I could have bailed Julian out sooner? You mean you could have bragged about me? No, Mom. I wanted to see if you respected me when I had nothing. And I got my answer. I turned to Leo. He was looking at me with wide eyes. Leo, I said gently, pack your violin. We're leaving. Now wait a minute. My father stood up, trying to regain control. You can't just come in here, throw keys around, and leave. We are your parents. If you have this much money, you have a responsibility to this family. Julian is your brother. If you own his debt, you just forgive it. That's what family does. Forgive it. I looked at my father with disbelief. He tried to get you to take custody of my son, Dad. Did you know that? He called me this week and threatened to have you sue for custody because I was poor. My father went pale. He looked at Julian. Julian looked down. Is that true? My father asked Julian. Julian didn't answer. It is, I said. And you, Dad? You agreed with him tonight. You said Leo needed to be straightened out. You wanted to take my son away. We just want what's best for the boy, my mother cried. A boy needs a mother. You can't raise him alone. I am raising him, I shouted. He is kind. He is talented. He is brilliant. He got a full scholarship to St. Jude's on his own merit. And you told me to decline it to protect Julian's feelings. I picked up the blue folder. Here is the deal, I said, addressing the room. Julian, you have 30 days to find a job. A real job. If you miss a payment to me, I foreclose. I will not hesitate. I will put this house on the market. You wouldn't, Julian gasped. Try me. I looked at my parents. And you too. You won't be seeing us for Sunday dinners anymore. Not until you can learn to respect my son exactly as he is. If I hear one more word about him being soft or needing a mother, we are gone forever. I stood up. Come on, Leo. Leo jumped up, grabbing his violin case. He looked taller somehow. He looked at Julian, then at Kevin. My dad is cool, Leo said to Kevin. It was the first time he had ever talked back. We walked toward the door. The silence behind us was deafening. It was the sound of an entire family structure collapsing under the weight of the truth. As I reached for the doorknob, my heart was pounding. I felt lighter than I had in 5 years. We walked out of the house and into the cool night air. The front door clicked shut behind us, sealing off the toxicity. My father ran out after us. Colton, wait! I stopped on the walkway, but I didn't turn around immediately. I took a deep breath. Colton, please. His voice was desperate. Don't leave like this. We were worried. We didn't know. I turned around. Under the porch light, my father looked old. For the first time, I didn't see the giant who ruled my childhood. I just saw a scared old man who realized he had bet on the wrong horse. You didn't know because you didn't look, Dad, I said. You saw what you wanted to see. You saw a loser, and you treated me like one. But the money, Colton, if you have that kind of wealth, you can't let your brother sink. He has children. Think of Kevin and Chloe. I am thinking of them, I said. That's why I'm forcing him to grow up. If I bail him out, he learns nothing. He needs to hit rock bottom. You're cruel, my father spat. Money has changed you. Money didn't change me, Dad. It just revealed who everyone really is. Then, I remembered something. Something I had found in the financial audit Sterling had run on the family to check for connected liabilities. By the way, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, I know about the insurance money. My father froze. What? Sarah's life insurance. The $150,000 was what was left after you and Mom took your cut for the funeral expenses. But the funeral only cost $12,000. You took $30,000 from a grieving widower and told me it was for administrative fees. I saw the transfer records yesterday. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. You stole from your dead daughter-in-law to buy Julian a graduation gift. A Rolex. I saw the receipt date, Dad. It matches the withdrawal. His face crumbled. The moral high ground he had tried to stand on disintegrated. Don't call me, I said. I'll call you when I'm ready, which might be a long time. I turned and walked away. Elena came running out next. She didn't look at my father. She ran straight to me. Colton. I stopped. Elena. She looked back at the house, then at me. Thank you for exposing him. I couldn't do it. I was too scared. You need to make a plan, Elena, I told her. He's going to be angry. I know, she said. She straightened her spine. I'm taking the kids to my sister's tonight. I'm not staying in that house with him. Not when he's like this. Good, I said. If you need anything, call me. I mean it. You've done enough, she smiled through tears. Go. Be with your son. I walked Leo to the Honda, but then I stopped. Actually, change of plans, I said. I pulled out my phone and texted the valet service I used for business events. I had arranged for a driver to bring the Panamera around the block, just in case I needed a quick exit or wanted to make a point. Wait here a second, buddy. 2 minutes later, the low rumble of a twin-turbo V8 engine echoed through the quiet suburban street. The black Porsche Panamera rolled up to the curb. My driver, a large man named Mike, stepped out and tossed me the keys. Evening, Mr. Miller. She's all fueled up. Thanks, Mike. Can you drive the Honda back to the apartment? You got it, boss. Leo's jaw dropped. Dad? That's your car. This is our car, Leo. I opened the passenger door for him. He slid into the creamy leather seat, looking around at the buttons, the screens, the luxury. He touched the dashboard tentatively. It's like a spaceship, he whispered. I got in the driver's side. I looked at the house one last time. I could see Julian standing in the window watching us. I revved the engine. It wasn't a show-off rev. It was a growl of dominance. I put it in drive and we pulled away. Dad? Leo asked as we merged onto the highway. Yeah, bud. Why did you hide it? The money. The car. Because, I said, glancing at him. I wanted to make sure that when people liked us, they liked us. Not the stuff we have. Does that make sense? He thought about it. Yeah. Kevin only has friends because he gives them stuff. I have friends because we like the same anime. I smiled. Exactly. But Dad. Yeah. Can we maybe drive this to school tomorrow? Just once? Kevin said his dad was going to pick him up in a Ferrari, but he never did. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh that came from my belly. You know what, Leo? Tomorrow we ride in style. We're going to pull right up to the front gate. Awesome, he whispered. He leaned back in the seat and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he looked relaxed. The tension in his shoulders was gone. I drove through the city, the lights reflecting off the hood of the Porsche. I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt since Sarah died. The storm was over. The wreckage was behind us. My brother was exposed, my parents were silenced, and I had my dignity back. But as I looked at my son sleeping in the passenger seat, I knew the real work was just beginning. I had torn down the old world. Now I had to build a new one. A world where Leo knew that being sensitive wasn't a weakness, and being a man wasn't about bullying people. And I finally had the means to do it. The morning after the dinner, the sun didn't just rise. It felt like it exploded into my bedroom. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't wake up with that heavy, suffocating weight on my chest. You know the feeling I'm talking about? The dread of facing people who make you feel small. It was gone. I walked into the kitchen. Leo was already up, dressed in his school uniform. But something was different. Usually, he'd be slumped over his cereal bowl, dreading the day. Today, he was standing by the window, airplaying his violin with a spoon. "Ready for the ride?" I asked, grabbing an apple. He grinned. "Is the spaceship still outside?" "It sure is." We walked out to the parking lot of our apartment complex. The black Porsche Panamera sat there like a panther among house cats. My neighbors, good people who worked hard, stopped and stared. I waved at Mrs. Higgins from 2B. She dropped her laundry basket. "Just borrowing it for the day, Mrs. Higgins," I joked. I didn't want to explain S&L Holdings at 7:30 a.m. The drive to school was the shortest 20 minutes of my life. When we pulled up to the drop-off zone, the reaction was visceral. Usually, the line was full of minivans and sensible sedans. The low rumble of my engine turned heads immediately. I saw Kevin, my nephew, getting out of his mother's car, an older SUV, since Julian had taken the Mercedes to look for clients, which we now knew meant hiding at Starbucks. Kevin's jaw hit the pavement. I put the car in park and got out to open Leo's door. I wanted this moment to be burned into his memory. Not the car, but the confidence. "Have a great day, Leo," I said loud enough for the nearby parents to hear. "Head high." Leo stepped out. He adjusted his backpack, looked at Kevin, gave a small, confident nod, and walked into the building. He didn't look back. He didn't shrink. That was the moment I knew we were going to be okay. But the real work was just starting. Breaking free is one thing. Staying free is another. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of logistics and legalities. I stuck to my word. I didn't kick Julian out of his house immediately. I'm not a monster. But I put him on the strictest repayment plan Mr. Sterling had ever drafted. I called it the reality check protocol. Julian had to sell the Mercedes. He had to sell his expensive watches. He had to downgrade his lifestyle to match his actual income, which was currently zero. Every dollar he scraped together went to me, the creditor. The golden child was now an employee of his own mistakes. Elena, to her credit, was stronger than I expected. She filed for legal separation 3 days after the dinner. I helped her find a rental property, a nice, modest townhouse in a good school district, and I paid the lease for the first year up front. I told her to consider it an investment in her freedom. She cried for an hour, but they were happy tears. She got a job as an office manager and started smiling again. As for my parents, silence. The phone didn't ring. No apologies. No guilt trips. I suspect the shame of me knowing about the stolen insurance money was too much for my father to handle. His moral authority had evaporated. They were alone in their big, empty house, with only their pride to keep them warm. 3 months later, I decided it was time for me and Leo to move. The apartment held too many memories of the struggling years. We needed a fresh canvas. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't buy the Hidden Hills house Julian had lusted after. That kind of flashy wealth attracts the wrong kind of attention. Instead, I bought a historic farmhouse on the edge of town. It had 4 acres of land, old oak trees, and most importantly, a detached carriage house that I converted into a soundproof music studio for Leo. It was a home, a real one. One Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after the dinner of insults, I was in the garden trying to figure out how to plant tomatoes. I was covered in dirt, wearing an old t-shirt. A car pulled into the long gravel driveway. It was a beat-up sedan. My brother, Julian, stepped out. I hadn't seen him since that night. He looked deflated. He had lost weight. His suit was gone, replaced by slacks and a polo shirt that looked a bit worn. He walked with a slight stoop. I stood up, wiping my hands on a rag. "Julian." "Colton," he nodded, looking around the property. "Nice place. A bit rustic for a millionaire. Isn't it?" "It's peaceful," I said. "What do you want?" He shifted his weight. "I came to bring you the check for this month's mortgage payment." He handed me an envelope. I didn't open it. I knew the amount would be correct. Mr. Sterling had told me Julian was working 2 jobs, one in car sales, entry-level, and one doing consulting gigs. You could have mailed it, I said. I know, he sighed. He looked at his shoes. I wanted to see you. He hesitated. I waited. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. Mom and Dad are not doing well, he said finally. Dad's blood pressure is up. Mom just sits in the living room looking at old photo albums. They miss Leo. They miss the idea of Leo, I corrected him. They miss having control. Maybe, Julian admitted. Look, Colton, I know I was a jerk. Okay. I was drowning and I lashed out. I was jealous. You had the freedom I pretended to have. It was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. I appreciate that, Julian. But you didn't just lash out. You tried to turn my son against me. You tried to take him away. I know, he whispered. I'm paying for it. Elena won't even look at me when I pick up the kids. I'm living in my old bedroom at Mom and Dad's. I'm 34 years old and my mother is doing my laundry. It's hell. I looked at him and felt a strange emotion. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was pity. The golden child had rusted. Keep making the payments, Julian, I said softly. Build your life back. But do it for yourself this time, not for an audience. He nodded, turned around, and walked back to his beat-up car. As he drove away, I realized that my revenge wasn't seeing him suffer. My revenge was seeing him become human. That evening, Leo had his first big concert with the St. Jude's Orchestra. I sat in the front row. I wore my charcoal suit. The auditorium was packed with parents, doctors, lawyers, tech moguls, people who used to intimidate me. Now, I sat among them as an equal, not because of my bank account, but because of my son. When Leo walked onto the stage, he looked small against the backdrop of the velvet curtains. He was the soloist for the night. He adjusted his violin under his chin. He closed his eyes and began to play. It was Vivaldi. The music soared through the hall, crisp and heartbreakingly beautiful. I watched his fingers dance over the strings. I watched the intense focus on his face. I thought about the night Julian called him a mess. I thought about my father calling him soft. They were wrong. He wasn't soft. He was made of steel and starlight. To stand up there, baring his soul to hundreds of strangers, that was the bravest thing I had ever seen. Tears streamed down my face. I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall. When he finished, there was a second of absolute silence. Then the room erupted. People stood up. The applause was like thunder. Leo opened his eyes. He looked, scanning the crowd. He wasn't looking for the applause. He was looking for me. When our eyes locked, he smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. In that moment, the ghost of the sad, lonely widower I used to be finally faded away. I wasn't just surviving anymore. We were thriving. 1 year later, the anniversary of Sarah's death. For the past 5 years, this day had been a black hole. A day where I would shut the curtains, turn off the phone, and just exist in the dark. But this year was different. Dad, are you ready? Leo called from the hallway. Coming. I walked out. Leo was wearing a nice button-down shirt and khakis. He looked so much older than 11. He had grown 3 inches in the last year. We got into the Porsche. We didn't drive it much. I still preferred the Honda for grocery runs, but today felt like an occasion for respect. We drove to the cemetery on the hill. It was a beautiful day, the kind Sarah loved. Blue skies, a slight breeze. We walked to her grave. I had pre-ordered a massive arrangement of white lilies, her favorite. We placed them against the cold stone. Sarah Miller, beloved wife and mother. I stood there holding Leo's hand. She would have loved the house, I said softly. She always wanted a garden. She would have loved that you're happy again, Leo said. I looked down at him. I am happy, Leo. You made that happen. Leo kicked at a pebble on the grass. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Dad. Yeah. I have a confession. My heart skipped a beat. What is it? Are you okay? You know how you thought you were hiding the money from me? For all those years. I nodded. Yeah. I didn't want you to turn into Well, into a brat. Leo chuckled. I kinda knew. Not about the millions or the company. But I knew we weren't poor. How? I remember when I was 7. I broke my arm. The hospital bill was huge. I heard Grandma talking about it. She said you'd be in debt forever. But then, the next day you were whistling in the kitchen. You paid it. You never stressed about money, Dad. You stressed about people. You stressed about Grandma and Grandpa yelling. But never about bills. I stared at him, stunned by his perception. Kids see everything. I also saw your computer screen once, he admitted sheepishly. I saw a graph going up, like really high up. I thought you were playing a video game where you were winning. I guess you were. I crouched down so I was eye level with him. If you knew, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you ask for a PlayStation or fancy sneakers? Leo shrugged. Because I liked our secret. Felt like we were spies. We were pretending to be normal, but we had this superpower. And besides, he looked at Sarah's headstone, then back at me. Uncle Julian had all the stuff. He had the cars and the big TV and the swimming pool. But he was always angry. He was always screaming at Kevin. You were always there, Dad. You played Legos with me. You listened to my violin practice even when I sounded like a dying cat. I didn't want to be rich like Julian. I wanted to be happy like us. I felt the breath leave my lungs. I had spent years trying to protect Leo from the world, thinking money was the shield. I thought my legacy was the portfolio, the assets, the screw-you money I could drop on the table to silence my enemies. But I was wrong. My legacy wasn't the blue folder. It wasn't the Porsche. It wasn't SNL Holdings. My legacy was standing right in front of me. My legacy was a boy who could see the difference between price and value. A boy who chose time over toys. A boy who saw his father not as a wallet, but as a presence. You're a wise man, Leo Miller, I whispered, pulling him into a hug. Wiser than I'll ever be. I know. He grinned into my shoulder. Mom probably helped with that. We stayed there for a long time, just watching the clouds move across the sky. I talked to Sarah in my head. I told her about the look on Julian's face when the truth came out. I told her about the music room. I told her that we made it. Not because we were rich, but because we broke the cycle. As we walked back to the car, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Mr. Sterling. Subject: Quarterly Report and Charitable Trust Update. I had started a foundation in Sarah's name 2 months ago. It provided scholarships for kids in single-parent homes who wanted to study the arts. Kids who were called soft or messy by the world. I put the phone away. Hey, I said, opening the car door. What do you say we go get some ice cream? The cheap kind. From the truck in the park. Leo's eyes lit up. The one with the gumball eyes? The one with the gumball eyes. We drove off, leaving the cemetery behind. The rearview mirror reflected the road we had traveled. It was bumpy. It was full of potholes and detour signs put up by people who didn't believe in us. But the windshield was wide open. I'm Colton. I'm a widower. I'm a father. And yes, I'm a wealthy man. But the richest thing I own isn't in the bank. It's the knowledge that when the world tried to tell my son he was broken, I had the power and the love to prove them wrong. And that, my friends, is a wealth that no foreclosure notice can ever take away. This story wasn't just about a satisfying revenge or a secret fortune. At its core, it's a lesson about self-worth and the definition of success. We live in a world that loves to judge us by our cover, the car we drive, the job title we hold, or the relationship status we have. My family judged me as half a man because I was a single dad driving a Honda. They judged Leo as weak because he chose a violin over a football. But the truth is, your value is never defined by someone else's inability to see it. There were 3 key takeaways I want you to walk away with. Silence is power. You don't need to broadcast your success to validate it. Sometimes, moving in silence and building your foundation in private is the strongest move you can make. Break the cycle. Toxic family dynamics don't fix themselves. You have to be the one brave enough to draw the line, even if it means walking away. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. Presence over presence. Leo didn't care about the money. He cared that I was there. To all the parents listening, your children want your time, not your things. I want to hear from you. What was the moment in the story that hit you the hardest? Was it the dinner table reveal? Or was it Leo's confession at the end? If you believe that integrity is worth more than image, please type "good" in the comments below. Let's flood the comments section with positivity to remind everyone that good fathers and strong families come in all shapes and sizes. Thank you for listening to my story. Stay strong, stay silent, and keep building.